I I forgot to move myself over to the side. Oops. Wait, hang on. Hang on. Ah, run away. Okay, now I can come back. Hello everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. We're halfway through the week. Let's go. Let's go. You're scared? Why? I ran away from you guys. You may have noticed that I very much lacked any facial expressions or anything at all. My face was still as a statue. But now I'm moving. I just had to wake up a little bit. That's all it was. I'm a real person. I just had to wake up my body. But no, my phone is almost dead. So I hope my charger can charge faster than VTube Studio can drain the battery. I'm not very confident in that, but we shall see. How much battery does it have? It has 9%. It has 9%. We will check on it again in about 5 minutes and see if it's winning the battle or if it's losing the battle. I like to imagine that like within the battery there's an actual battle going on between the forces of consumption and the forces of charging. And of course the forces of charging are heavily cavalry based, but the consumption I guess the consumption guys would be like, what, the Tyranids from 40k? Were they the Tyranids? Yeah, they were the Tyranids. The Scourge, no. Was it the Scourge that was from StarCraft? Or what were those little bug guys called again? The Swarm? I think it was a Swarm, maybe. I didn't play much StarCraft 2. I had a few friends who did, and I tried it a couple of times. Mostly I was just bullied while I had a man. They would send giant tanks and like giant bugs at me. The Zerg, that's what they were called. The Zerg. Yeah, the Zerg rush. Yeah. How could I forget that? How could I forget that term? While I had a man screaming in my ear saying, "You must construct additional pylons. You must construct additional pylons." I didn't know how to. I figured it out eventually, but I got very confused. I was never big into those types of real-time strategy games. Although I have enjoyed like Total War and stuff, but those are different. Those are different to those kinds of games. It reminded me a little bit. I watched a video recently that was all about like old Flash games, and particularly about the Age of War series. And yeah, it was a fairly basic game, but it reminded me then of Stick Wars. Did you guys ever play that on Stick Page or maybe Newgrounds? I think it was called Stick Wars anyway. You would like fight through, and you had like the swordsmen, you had the archers, the Spartans, you had the magicians, the giants. What else could you have? I think that was about it. I liked that game. I played that game a lot when I was like 1812. I never was big into like PC gaming until I got like a laptop that could run things decently enough. And by decently, what I mean is it struggled with most things. I think that's probably why I appreciated map games that didn't require too much graphical power. But then the CPU would, like, I mean, even if I put the speed of like CK2 up to 5, it was not going to be that fast. Remember, I did that the first time I got my PC, my proper built one, the one that I built, and I opened up CK2 and I put it on 5 speed, and I just hit play. And a year passed in about 6 seconds, and I was amazed. I was shocked, incredulous. I was a very, very happy Ruadh. Just like that little Ruru over there, like little Ruru, cozy and and warm. And I hope you guys have been keeping cozy and warm recently. It's getting cold. It's getting cold. Especially this morning was I love walking out and seeing like the white frost on the ground, the frost on the grass. I love walking through grass that's kind of frosty and it's all crunchy under your foot. It's like crunch. It's nice. And seeing the white on the cars and then the trees. It's fun. Don't get too much snow though. I would like some snow sometimes. But the last time Ireland got like a lot of snow, we were not prepared. But that's kind of expected, you know, places that just don't experience that type of weather wouldn't be prepared for that stuff. And even the governments would be like, it's not worth it. We'll just like put up with the country being shut down for like I don't know what happened. There was apparently like a day or two ago, in one of the airports, a plane was not able to land for like 2 hours or something, for like 2.5 hours. So they just had to keep going around in circles, and like little like eights, infinity loops. For oh my god, I would crack up. I don't think it was maybe 3 hours was the total flight time, but it was meant to be like an hour and a half. But oh god. Hello, Regulus. How are you? How you doing, Regulus? I hope you're having a very nice week. I had a nice day today, cause I had 2 days off, because I took sick day leaves. It was very comfy and cozy. And then when I came in today, there was treats, there was sweets and things in the office, or in the forest meeting, in the forest meeting, which was quite nice. Comfy overload. It was so nice. I hope you guys are being comfy. I'm quite warm right now. One thing for cold weather, I love turtlenecks because either it keeps your neck really cold, really warm, or you can put the thing up over your face like a face mask. But hello, Zan. How you doing? So last time I did a stream, Monday, it was a reading stream. And I was considering calling this one like 2.5 because I really didn't read. I read about 4 pages of the book that we're doing, The Theological Origins of Modernity. Well, eyes track. There we go. There we go. But I read about 3 or 4 pages and then I did a presentation for like 90 minutes. Amazingly, that was actually kind of popular for some reason. I think people saw a PowerPoint presentation and were like, okay, why is my eye tracking is like delayed on one eye? Like, come on. There we go. It might be the bat war that's being raged in the battery. Or it might just be that I'm constantly looking side to side, so I'm looking over at you guys to read you. But today is actually going to be a proper reading stream, and it's actually going to cover a lot of the ground that we covered in the discussion in the presentation yesterday or Monday, and that's because I kind of intended for that to be the whole reason I did that presentation was to try and give, I guess, a bit of background context and a kind of summation of the overall point of the book and what the author is trying to do. So it was interesting. I wouldn't mind trying things like that again. You know, doing little PowerPoint presentations and talks and like lectures to you guys. Don't worry, there's no exams. You don't have to take notes. I will personally test you. I will just ask you a question about it, and I will expect you to know the answer. But that's not an exam. That's just me expecting highly of you guys, And not just an answer, I expect an essay. It's not an exam, don't worry, but I expect an essay. But yeah, it could be fun. I could do stuff on like Irish history or just broad history. I don't know, some random place. I could do more on philosophy. I could talk about how Plato sought to synthesize the ever-flowing flux of Heraclitus with the Paramedian one, the unchanging, and that's what led him to postulate the forms in an attempt to both have change, to have the one and the many, and to allow for things to move and change. That could be an interesting conversation. I think maybe people enjoyed it seems anyway. I think the presentation was because it led into like actual effects in the modern world, and I think people often like that type of stuff. But I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna get into the reading stream. We're gonna get cozy, and however you guys want to do it, just have me on in the background to be some white noise for you, or listen intently to prepare for the upcoming essay I expect from you. I hope you can enjoy. So we will get back into The Theological Origins of Modernity by Michael Allen Gillespie. Chapter 1. The Nominalist Revolution and the Origin of Modernity. Held for smart detection. I will deny that. Good job, smart detection. There was a best viewers thing, and Twitch. I feel like Twitch has genuinely. I feel like Twitch has done an amazing job recently on dealing with that type of stuff. I've seen like maybe 2 in the past month and a half or something, which is I'm very happy with that. And the fact it picks it up and doesn't allow it in chat for you guys, it's even better. The theological crisis of late medieval thought. While the modern world became conscious of itself in the 16th and 17th centuries, it would be as much a mistake to believe that modernity began at that time as it would be to believe that human life begins when one first becomes self-conscious. Modernity did not spring forth full-grown from the head of Galileo, Bacon, Descartes, or Hobbes, but arose over a long period of time and as a result of the efforts of many different people in a variety of contexts. As we discussed above, it is one of the chief characteristics of modernity to conceive itself as radically new and unprecedented. This is the consequence of a peculiarly modern understanding of human capabilities and capacities, and of the way in which human beings unfold in time. However, there are good reasons to doubt that this modern self-understanding is correct. As Oedipus tragically discovered, no one is fortune's child. Every one and everything has an origin and is shaped in decisive ways by that origin. To begin to understand the nature of the modern world, it is thus critical that we examine its early, pre-conscious development. In the 300 years between the collapse of the Middle Age and the rise of modernity. Hello, Crespian. Hello. Or not Crespian, sorry. Hello, copyright. I said hello, and then I looked up to read the rest of the chat, and my eye looked at Crespian's name. So my brain was trying to say copyright. I was looking at Crespian, and I was like, hello, Crespian. I'm silly. Sorry, copyright. Hello, copyright. That's a really cute panda. I think it's a panda. It looks like a cute panda. Crespian. It's Crespian, up above Crespian Sea. You can be copy Respian. Oh, we're shipping my viewers now. Let's not do that. Let's move on with the book. The origin of the medieval world can be traced to the synthesis of Christianity and pagan philosophy in the Hellenistic world of late antiquity. This began in Alexandria in the 1st and 2nd centuries. Here, various strains of Christian thought, Eastern religious beliefs, Neoplatonism, and a variety of other ancient philosophical views were amalgamated in different and at times conflicting ways, reflecting the intellectual and spiritual ferment of the times. This process of amalgamation was clarified and institutionalized when Christianity was adopted as the official religion of the Roman Empire under Emperor Constantine. The various conflicting strains of Christianity were fused into a formalized doctrine in a series of councils, beginning with the Council of Nicaea in 323. How are you doing, Ruadh 53? I'm doing pretty good. I hope your week is going well. Copyright. I've been good. I had a nice extra break this from Monday and Tuesday from work, so I'm pretty good. However, despite this doctrinal consolidation enforced by imperial authority, the tensions of Christianity became between revelation and its emphasis on divine omnipotence and incarnation on one hand, and philosophy with its emphasis on rationalism and the notion of a rational cosmos on the other, were not so easily resolved and remained a continuing problem for Christianity throughout its long history. Indeed, much if not all of the succeeding development of Christian theology was made necessary by the continual and periodically deepening antagonism between these two elements of Christianity. And I believe during this period, Christianity was very strongly, how might one say, I don't want to say anti-philosophy, sort of anti-material. It's obviously it's a non-materialist philosophy in religion, but it really emphasized the aspect of the spirit, of the soul, of preparing for death. Very, very similar to Socrates, that philosophy is preparing for death. But you also had at this time, you had the not the Aristotelians, the who am I thinking of? I don't want to say decadents, but the people who embrace pleasure. Oh my god. I hate when this happens. When you have a name on the tip of your tongue and you just can't think of it. Someone will say it, I'm sure. But thank you for the lurk. Copyright. Hedonism. So, hello, Claire. Hello. Hedonism. Yes, sort of. But it's a particular... Hang on. I need to look up the philosopher of hedonism. I promise I read this stuff, guys. That's Jeremy Bentham. No. Epicurus is who I was thinking of. Epicurus was who I was thinking of. So Epicurean. Wait, no. Is that Epicureanism that I'm thinking of? Epicurean. Yes, indulging in the sensual pleasures. So yeah, you had these various philosophies that were very much Epicurean in nature. Especially I think a couple of cults of the Roman and Greek gods, and Christianity was kind of very much revolting against that, because they saw these, even the rationalism of Plato, of the Neoplatonists, they saw this as pagan influence. During the early modern period, the knowledge of the impact of Greek philosophy on Christianity was largely lost in Western Europe, although Boethius provided a slim connection to this earlier intellectual tradition. The decisive event in medieval Christianity was the rediscovery of Aristotle, largely through contact with the Arab world in Spain and the Levant. I will also add that Epicurus maybe some art pieces could definitely be seen as a epicure for you guys, feasting on some of the art style. I do have something in the works being drawn by a very talented goblin. We may have the first proper not safe for work art, but we'll see how that turns out. But I'll also add that obviously Western Europe would also have been in contact with the Byzantines, and they would have had, information there. We do see references to them, but I suppose the focus on Aristotle would have been driven a lot by the Arab world. This led, shortly after a millennium, to the rise of what was called scholasticism, which was the greatest and most comprehensive theological attempt to reconcile the philosophical and scriptural elements of Christianity. While there was considerable variety within scholasticism, its classic form was realism. Realism, as the scholastics understood it, was a belief in the extramental existence of universals. Drawing heavily on a Neoplatonic reading of Aristotle, scholastic realists argue that universals, such as species and genera, were the ultimately real things, and that individual beings were merely particular instances of these universals. Moreover, these universals were thought to be nothing other than a divine reason made known to man either by illumination, as Augustine had suggested, or through the investigation of nature, as Aquinas and others argued. So remember, for Thomas, you investigate nature to discover the universals, which give you insight into the divine mind of God, because ultimately these universals are placed within God's mind. They come from God in scholasticism. Nature could consequently be described by a syllogistic logic that defined the rational structure of the relationships of all species to one another. Moreover, while God transcended his creation, he was still reflected in it, and by analogy could be understood through it. Thus, logic and natural theology could supplement, or, in the mind of some, even replace revelation. Remember, we mentioned that some suggested that you didn't need the Bible, you didn't need revelation. And that's almost an extreme position, practically heretical. For similar reasons, man did not need Scripture to inform him of his earthly, moral, and political duties. He was a natural being with a natural end and was governed by the laws of nature. Scripture, of course, was necessary in order to understand everything that transcended nature, including man's. Excuse me a moment. I had to mute for a moment. I am back now. Including man's supernatural destiny, but earthly life could be grasped philosophically. That mention there of God being reflected in nature, and through analogy we could come to understand him, is a whole discussion in of itself. It's a whole the analogical predication of God is a massive point that's very important to understand how the scholastics understood God as divinely simple and having all of these characteristics, yet also being one and simple. Not, all of these characteristics that we would describe him as having, the transcendentals, are spoken only analogically, because he doesn't act. He does. They're all the same part. They're all the same They're all the same God, but viewed from different perspectives. And maybe that's a thing I could talk about sometime. The analogistic predication. For all of its magnificence, the cathedral of scholastic thought depended on the delicate counterbalancing of Christian belief and pagan rationalism, and it was the instability of this relationship that brought it down. And he has a note here. Umberto Eco brilliantly portrayed this conflict and collapse in his novel, The Name of the Rose. I recognize Umberto Eco's name. I haven't read anything by him, though. The balance was threatened by the growing influence of reason and secularism within the Church, which fostered a falling away from Christian practices, and by the ever-recurring and even more urgent demands for a more original Christianity, based on revelation or an imitation of the life of Christ. The preservation of medieval Christianity depended upon a reconciliation of these two powerful and opposing impulses. Such a synthesis, however, could only be maintained in theory by the creation of an ever more elaborate theology, and in practice by the ever-increasing use of papal and princely power. The immediate cause of the dispute that shattered the synthesis was the growth of Aristotelianism, both within and outside the Church. The increasing interest in Aristotle was in part an inevitable consequence of the growth of scholasticism itself, but was decisively accelerated by the reintroduction of many Aristotelian texts to Christian Europe through the commentaries of the great Islamic philosophers Avicenna and Averroes. The most visible manifestation of this new interest in Aristotle was the development of an independent system of philosophy alongside theology, and a new kind of secular Christian intellectual. This phenomenon was viewed with deep suspicion. This phenomenon was viewed with deep suspicion by the pious defenders of a more original Christianity, not merely because of its pagan roots, but also, and perhaps more importantly, because of its connection to Islam. Paganism was a known and tolerable evil. Islam, by contrast, was an ominous theological and political threat. This was especially true after the failure of the Crusades. For almost 200 years, Christianity had seemed to gain ground against Islam, especially in the East. But after the loss of all the Christian colonies in the Levant in the later 13th century, and the rise of Islamic military power, this optimism dimmed and the suspicion of Islamic influences on Christian thought became more intense. The growth of Aristotelianism in this context was often seen by suspicious defenders of the faith as the growth of Averroism. There's a long note here. As we find ourselves entangled in a struggle against anti-modern forces that draw much of their inspiration from Islam, it is important to recognize that a decisive turn away from the medieval world in the direction of modernity was rooted in a fear and rejection of Islamic influences on Christian thought. It is probably not accidental that this fear arose in tandem with the actual military threat of Islam to Europe itself. Ironically, as we will see below, the nominalist alternative that arose in reaction to scholasticism was probably also indebted to Islamic thought, although to a less philosophical and more fundamentalist strain of Islam. I'm not exactly well studied on Islamic theology, so I can't speak much to that. So we'll just have to take the book's word for it. The Church attempted to limit what it saw as a theologically subversive development by fiat. Aristotelianism was condemned first in 1270, and then more fully in 1277 by the Bishop of Paris, Etienne Tempier, and by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Robert Kilwarby. The positions staked out in this condemnation laid great emphasis on omnipotence as the cardinal characteristic of God, and in the succeeding years the notion of omnipotent freedom came to constitute the core of a new anti-Aristotelian notion of God. This view of God was reflected in part in the work of Duns Scotus, but more clearly and decisively with the work of William of Ockham, and the nominalist evolution, or the nominalist movement, his thought engendered. There's a point here. On this point, see Edward Grant's The Effect of Condemnation of 1277. It would probably be more accurate to say that condemnation focused primarily on those elements of Aristotelianism that were most deeply influenced by Averroism. Occam was born in England between 1280 and 1285. After entering the Franciscan order at an early age, he completed his study at Oxford. He was probably not the student of his famous successor Duns Scotus, but was certainly deeply influenced by his thought, which remained strong at Oxford. Most of Occam's philosophical and theological work was completed between 1317 and 1324, when he was summoned to Avignon to answer charges of heresy. In 1326, 51 of his assertions were declared open to censure, although none were actually condemned. You have to remember, at this time period, I believe the papacy sits in Avignon, rather than in Rome. I think just due to the general danger of Rome at the time, it was very much kind of breaking down. I can't. And obviously there was, the prestige of having the papacy for the king. Drawing on the work of earlier proto-nominalist thinkers such as Roscelin and Abelard, and the work of Henry of Ghent and Scotus, Occam laid out in great detail the foundations for a new metaphysics and theology that were radically at odds with scholasticism. Fate alone, Occam argues, teaches us that God is omnipotent, and that he can do everything that is possible, that is to say, everything that is not contradictory. So again, the law of non-contradiction. There's a long note here. One should not be misled by the fact that Occam presents himself in the guise of a traditional scholastic, in fact as a follower of the Via Antiquia. It is important to remember the context within which he wrote, and particularly his Thomistic adversaries at Oxford. They had no doubts about the revolutionary character of his thought, in spite of his efforts to portray himself as a traditionalist. Indeed, they denounced his thought as heretical. Contemporary scholars who are anxious to demonstrate his orthodoxy are in part interested in defending his Catholicism against the long-standing charge that he was the father, or at least the forefather, of the Protestant Reformation. Whether or not he was in part responsible for the Reformation, there can be no doubt that his thought represents a metaphysical and theological break with scholasticism. Oh God, where was I? Here we are. Drawing on the work of earlier proto-nominalist thinkers such as Ruadh. I read this. Where did I end? Thus, every being exists only as a result of his willing it, and it exists as it does, and as long as it does, only because he so wills it. Creation is thus an act of sheer grace, and is comprehensible only through revelation. God creates the world and continues to act within it, bound neither by its laws nor by his previous determinations. He acts simply and solely as he pleases, and, as Occam often repeats, he is no man's debtor. There is thus no immutable order of nature or reason that man can understand, and no knowledge of God except through revelation. Occam thus rejected the scholastic synthesis of reason and revelation, and in this way undermined the metaphysical and theological foundation of the medieval world. I'm sure he might talk about it here, but it's important to understand that for the scholastics, God was pure act, actus purus. And as being pure act, he could not change in any way. There was no change in God. For the scholastics, change, which is not just movement, but also means going from one thing to another, is the reduction of a potency, which all things have potencies, under scholasticism, which argues that, it's not like a rubber ball can become a duck, but rather the potency of the rubber ball to no longer be a rubber ball by becoming melted rubber, or for the red rubber ball to become blue by being dipped in blue paint. Or at least taking on the characteristic of being blue in that way. And such a thing would be the reduction of potential to actual. But of course, if it becomes blue, then it also now has the potential to be red. This may be a little bit difficult. It is. Trust me. Again, this is the way the scholastics conceive of change. But what this means, God cannot ungod himself, or he wouldn't be God. That's yes. That would be kind of difficult. If God ungodded himself, we would all cease to exist. That would not be a good thing. But what was the point I wanted to make? Oh yes, and because God could not change, essentially, he couldn't change his mind. His thoughts, his mind, his intellect was eternal, unchanging. And as such, there was an order, there was a structure in place. And you can see how Occam has a radically different view. The notion of divine omnipotence was responsible for the demise of realism. God, Occam argued, could not create universals because to do so would constrain his omnipotence. If a universal did exist, God would be unable to destroy any instance of it without destroying the universal itself. Thus, for example, God could not damn one human being without damning all of humanity. If there are no real universals, every being must be radically individual. A unique creation of God himself, called forth out of nothing by his infinite power and sustained by that power alone. To be sure, God might employ secondary causes to produce or sustain an entity, such as, you are an individualized thing that is created and sustained by God, but through secondary power, he creates you through your parents, for instance. It's kind of what he's getting at there. But they were not necessary and were not ultimately responsible for the creation or the continued existence of the entity in question. The only necessary being for Occam was God himself. All other beings were contingent creations of his will. In a technical sense, the things God chooses to bring into existence already have a nature, but these natures are themselves not universal, but apply to each thing individually. Moreover, they are infinite in number and chosen freely by divine will. So quite a few notes that I've passed through. Let's take a look at any of them. So note 9 here. God can sustain any one thing in existence without the necessity of his existence of anything else in the universe. On the ontological uniqueness of God as the nominalist understood him. Yeah, because some of this is very similar to scholasticism, at least Thomism. Things like God being the only necessary being. Everything else depends upon him. That is the necessity of oh god, I think that's the second of the necessity argument, basically a cosmological argument. Necessity and contingency, I guess, the contingency argument. But obviously, I guess they're coming at it in different ways, very radically different. These natures thus do not in any real sense constrain divine will except insofar as they exclude the impossible, that is, the logically contradictory. They are neither implied by nor are they the presupposition of anything else. In this way, Occam's assertion of ontological individualism undermines not only ontological realism, but also syllogistic logic and science. For in the absence of real universals, names become mere signs or signs of signs. Language thus does not reveal being, but in practice often conceals the truth about being by fostering a belief in the reality of universals. So remember, the universals are basically the characteristics, the what would you call it? What was the word I used again Monday? Yeah, I suppose characteristics of a thing. What you would predicate of a thing. In fact, all so-called universals are merely second or higher order signs that we as infinites, that we as finite beings use to aggregate individual beings into categories. These categories, however, do not denote real things. They are only useful fictions that help us make out the sense of the radically individualized world. However, they also distort reality. Thus, the guiding principle of anomalous logic for Occam was his famous razor: do not multiply universals needlessly. While we cannot, as finite beings, make sense of the world without universals, every generalization takes us one more step away from the real. Hence, the fewer we employ, the closer we remain to truth. Hello, Big Devon. You ever listen to Blady? I'm not familiar with that name. I apologize. Did we pass note 12? I believe we did, yes. So it's just a fuller explanation of Occam's razor. The principle has several other forms. No plurality should be assumed unless it can be proved by reason or by experience or by some infallible authority. One should not affirm no statement is true or maintain that something exists unless forced to do so by self-evidence, that is, by revelation, experience, or logical deduction. Those seem more fancy and difficult. Since each individual being for Occam, is contingent upon God's free will, there can be no knowledge of created beings prior to investigation. As a result, humans cannot understand nature without an investigation of the phenomena themselves. Syllogism is thus replaced by hypothesis as the foundation of science. Moreover, human knowledge can never move beyond hypothesis, for God is free in the fullest sense, that is, free even from his previous decisions. He can thus overturn anything he has established, interrupt any change of causes, or create the modern world again from the beginning if he wants to. So we're beginning to see the seeds of empiricism, the seeds of the scientific method of science as we know it, and possibly even scientism, which isn't necessarily a good thing. The scientism part, not the other things are decent, like the scientific method. There is therefore no absolute necessity except for God's will. God, according to Occam, did not even have to send his son in the form of a man. The Savior might have been a donkey or a rock. In defending such a radical notion of omnipotence, Occam and his followers came very close to denying the truth of revelation. They sought to avoid this heretical conclusion by distinguishing between God's potentia absoluta and his potentia ordinata, between his absolute and his ordained power, between what God could do and what he determined he would do. This distinction, however, was difficult to maintain because God was under no obligation to keep his promises or to act consistently. For nominalism, God is, to use a technical term, indifferent. That is, he recognizes no natural or rational standards of good and evil that guide or constrain his will. What is good not in by itself, but simply because he wills it. Thus, while God today may save the saints and damn the sinners, tomorrow he may do the reverse, recreating the world from its very beginning if necessary. Scientism, boo. Scientific realists, boo. Get him, Claire. Claire being held back, saying, let me at him. To be fair, neither Occam nor most of his followers believed that God was likely to do this. They were for the most part probabilists. That is to say, they believed that in all likelihood God could be relied upon to keep his promises. They thus did not really believe that God would damn the saints and save the sinners, but they insisted that such a possibility could not be dismissed without denying God's divinity. Most nominalists were convinced that human beings could know little about God and his intentions beyond what he revealed to them in Scripture. Natural theology, for example, can prove God's existence, infinity, and supremacy, according to Occam, but it cannot even demonstrate that there is only one God. Such a radical rejection of scholastic theology clearly grew out of a distrust not merely of Aristotle and his Islamic interpreters, but of philosophical reason itself. In this sense, Occam's thought strengthened the role of revelation in Christian life. I disagree. I disagree with Occam here. I think you certainly can, and I believe Aquinas does do this at some point. He does argue that the actus purus, pure act, the ipsum esse subsistent, the subsistens, the act of existence itself, i.e., what is called God, whatever, all of these characteristics, that he must be one, or it must be one. So I do disagree with Occam here a little bit, but maybe there's further arguments that I haven't considered. Occam also rejected the scholastic understanding of nature. Scholasticism imagined nature to be teleological, a realm in which divine purposes were repeatedly realized. Particular entities became what they already potentially were in attaining their special end. They thus saw motion as directed towards the good. The nominalist rejection of universals was thus a rejection not merely of formal, but also of final causes. And just a comment on that, of things moving towards the good, of aiming towards the good, in this teleological perspective. So telos, again, I mentioned on Monday's stream. Telos is basically the idea that things that are created, that things that are in existence, have a goal towards which they go towards, or they're goal directed. They have a purpose. So the universe under scholasticism is inherently purposeful. And by reaching a thing's natural end, it effectively exhausts its active potencies to its fullest. So what do I maybe I mean by that? Say you take a particular oak seed. Its natural end under scholasticism would be to become an oak tree. And let's say it has more than enough nutrients, more than enough sun, and it becomes a great and powerful oak tree, as powerful as its genetics could allow it. That has reached its natural end as an oak seed. Obviously, it has since become an oak tree. But that is the pure, not the pure act, but the fullest sense of act of which that individual substance is capable of. And in this sense, it would be called good. Because under scholasticism, being in act is a good in itself, because God is supremely good by virtue of his nature. He is pure act, actus purus. And so evil for the scholastics doesn't actually exist. They view evil as the absence of existence, as the absence of goodness, an absence of good. And an absence of good is an absence of act. And this leads to the conception of natural evils, things that through chance occurrences, maybe there isn't enough sunlight for a particular seed, it's not able to reach its fullest act, or it doesn't reach any act at all. There's less actualized potential. And also for moral evils. If a human takes an action that leads to a more fuller expression of a thing's essence, then that is good. So you might look to the idea of parents nurturing their child in beneficial ways that allow them to what's the word that psychologists use at the top of the triangle? Actualization? I think it may actually even be actualization. Self-actualization. That's the word I was looking for. So that's actually a funny coincidence from a theological perspective, that they both use those words, obviously in different ways, but it's funny. It's funny. But then if a human takes an action that leads to less activity, that is an evil act. So in this case, you can have a direct act where someone, a living human is more in act than a dead human. So killing, in this case, is evil. Murdering, we'll say. And then also not acting not moving to prevent such a thing is also kind of in itself an evil. So that was a very quick and very rough explanation of scholastic response to the problem of evil. But also kind of giving context to why Occam's kind of point about evil being, or good and evil not being capable of lacking purposefulness in the teleological aspect is so different to the scholastics. They thus saw in motion particular entities became what they already potentially were in attaining their special ends. They thus saw motion as directed towards the good. The nominalist rejection of universals was thus a rejection not merely of formal but also of final causes. If there were no universals, there could be no universal ends to be actualized. Nature thus does not direct human beings to the good, or to put the matter more positively, nominalism opens up the possibility of a radically new understanding of human freedom. The fact that human beings have no defined natural ends does not mean that they have no moral duties. The moral law continues to set limits on human action. However, the nominalists believe that this law is known only by revelation. Moreover, there is no natural or soteriological motive to obey the moral law. God is no man's debtor, and does not respond to man. Therefore, he does not save or damn them because of what they do and don't do. There is no utilitarian motive to act morally. The only reason for moral action is gratitude. For nominalism, human beings owe their existence solely and simply to God. He has already given them the gift of life, and for this humans should be grateful. To some few he will give a second, good eternal life, but he is neither nor just nor unjust in his choice, since his giving is solely an act of grace. To complain about one's fate would be irrational because no one deserves existence, let alone eternal existence. Let's take a look at if there's any interesting notes here. So points just from that. As severe as this position might seem, it makes it, in one sense, it ameliorates the Thomistic doctrine of original sin, since Occam believes that no man intrinsically deserves damnation. As this short sketch makes clear, the God that nominalism revealed was no longer the beneficent and reasonable predictable God of scholasticism. The gap between man and God had been greatly increased. God could no longer be understood or influenced by human beings. He acted simply out of freedom and was indifferent to the consequences of his act. He laid down the rules for human conduct, but he might change them at any moment. Some were saved and some were damned, but there was only an accidental relation between salvation and saintliness and damnation and sin. Ooh, we're going to stop that ad from occurring. Ads hate. It is not even clear that God loves man. The world this God created was thus a radical chaos of utterly diverse beings, in which humans could find no point of creativity or security. How could anyone love or venerate such an unsettling God? This was not a new question. The author of Job had posed it many centuries earlier in confronting a similar possibility, and Calvin was later so troubled by the injustice of such a God that he could only imagine him to be the devil in disguise. It is perhaps no accident that this view of God originated among the Franciscans, who stood at the opposite extreme of the theological spectrum of the Aristotelians. During the late medieval period, they were the preeminent voice calling for a more original or primitive Christianity that took its bearings not from the philosophical ideas of the Greeks and the corrupt political structures of the Roman state, but from the example of Christ. The Christian life, they argued, was not to be found in papal palaces and curial power, but in poverty and asceticism. The most radical Franciscans found even revelation insufficient, and believed that one could only live a Christian life if one imitated the life of Christ and his disciples. They were not alone in their pursuit of this alternative. In fact, they were only the most famous of the primitivist movements within the church that included the earlier Cathari, Waldensians, and the Humilitai. Francis, however, spoke for all of these radicals when he argued that to be a Christian one must walk with Christ, retracing the Via Dolorosa. Only in this way could one appreciate the meaning of the Incarnation and God's love for man. Francis embodied this dedication to suffering in his own asceticism and stigmata, and enshrined it in his famous rule that imposed austerity and poverty upon his followers. See if there's any notes. So, for example, they wanted the Pope to allow communal ownership of property, and they believed that God was not bound by his past acts and could predestine individuals as he wished. Poverty is cool. It is a very respectable thing if one lives just perfectly within their means, or attempts to anyway, and uses that to uses the excess to help. It is in that way a noble thing. After his death in 1226, the Franciscan order split between the zealots, who demanded strict obedience of the rule, and the moderates who sought a papal suspension for its more extreme strictures. Given the broad appeal of this movement among the common people and the consequent threat that it presented to the well-heeled clerical hierarchy, Pope John XII, the 22nd, 1249 to 1334, not only granted such a suspension, but also condemned and hunted down the most zealous Franciscans, the so-called fraticelli. While this satisfied the more pragmatic members of the order, John did not stop there. Drawn into a dispute with the Franciscan order and their Governor-General Michael of Cesena over the issue of poverty, the so-called poverty dispute, he ultimately condemned the Franciscan belief in the moral superiority of the ascetic life in 1326, arguing that this opinion contradicted Scripture. I just realized I never had my book up. I don't know if you guys know, but I've been reading this from memory. My perfectly picturesque memory. I need to remember to use my toggles. You believe St. Clare begged for food, and the god wanted to give her a stipend to stop her begging, but she refused, and he was not happy. I don't recognize that story, but that's kind of funny. Like, damn, woman, just take the money and buy the thing. Please, just take the money. John recognized that the deduction of poverty not only threatened his power within the church, but also threatened to transform Christianity as a whole. The medieval church understood itself as the embodiment of the Holy Spirit, and thus as exercising God's dominion or kingship on earth. Churchmen thus imagined that they should live in a manner befitting their status. The Franciscan doctrine of poverty challenged this view. Man, as Francis understood him, is not by nature an exalted being. His joy comes not from his place or possessions in the world, but from his nearest to God, nearness. The kingdom of God is thus not a literal kingdom here on earth represented by the church, but a spiritual kingdom in which individuals are related to one another only in and through God. Taken to its extreme, such a doctrine was thus not merely an attack on priestly wealth and power, it was also an attack on clerical hierarchy and on the church itself. One of the leading spokesmen for the Franciscan side in this debate was William of Ockham. who was then in Avignon to defend himself against charges of heresy levelled by his Thomistic opponents. The Pope based his argument against the superiority of poverty on the natural necessity of property to the preservation of human life, asserting that property existed even before the fall. The Franciscans, by contrast, rested their case on revelation, arguing that property existed not by nature, but only as a result of sin, and therefore only after the fall. Oh, God, how dare you? How dare you? Poking me. How dare you? I caught you. I saw you poking me. Don't you try and hide behind that wall. I'm trying to sneakily poke me. Nuh-uh. Nuh-uh. What do you mean, nuh-uh, Gwynny? Huh? Trying to poke me. Get over here. I'm gonna poke you back. I'm gonna poke you back in the face. I'm gonna poke your cheeks. Squishy cheeks. And I'm gonna pinch your cheeks. Hello, Gwyn. No, don't shout at me. Don't shout at me. No pinch. I'm pinching. I'm pinching your cheeks. I'm pinching your cheeks, and you're gonna like it. And you have to like it. How you doing? I hope you're having a very nice week, Winnie. We're just reading about a theological debate. Very, very exciting reading. Where's George? Thank you, Fox. I like head pats. Thank you, Fox. And hello, Fox. I hope you're having a nice week too. We should play more. Helldivers 2 soon. Anything is pleasant if Ruadh is doing it. Aw, thank you, Gob. Thank you. I do like to think that I'm just background noise for everyone, just cozy. I do sometimes wonder if people fall asleep to my voice when I just chat away or read away. Do they ever put their heads down and put their phone on their desk next to them and are just taken to sleep land? Hydrate? We should? We definitely should. Where's my bottle of water? Oh, there it is. You need extra stretching? Why is it out of stock? Stretching shouldn't be out of stock. That's annoying. Maybe I have some weird I have some weird I have some weird setting. Let me look at this. You know what? I'll figure it out. I'll stretch now. Oh, my back that's nice. By the tissue box, you assume? No, it was by my bag. I don't have a tissue box in my room. I've done this before. I've talked about what's on my desk. On my desk is deodorant, a USB, nail clippers, nail file. There's some shampoo that I need to put into the shower. And by into the shower, I mean next to the waterfall that I go have a shower in, because I live in the woods. That's about it. Whatever's laying around. No. A well-groomed scholar. I was talking to someone about this earlier. I sometimes I'm actually quite happy with how my nails were clipped this time around. Sometimes I feel like I go too deep on one side and I feel like it ruins the shape, or I go too sharp in to the point and it's just like, oh, it just doesn't look nice. This time I got them nice and round. I don't know what you guys do. I kind of alternate my clipping style. Sometimes I just clip off the whole nail. So I have to go in like a line. Like, do 2 clips to get it off. Maybe I should try and get like a wider, like a longer. No, that's dumb. I guess I just have like kind of slightly wide fingers. Then other times I use what I call like the 2-clip method, I guess. You like clip either side and then you file down the center. Thank you so much, Josh Red VT, for the follow. Welcome in, welcome in. Thank you so much for the first time chat. And actually, thanks Fox for the first time chat as well. I just realized that. But I hope you're doing well. Welcome in, welcome in. Oh, cute. That's a cute Pikachu. I like him. You're good. That's nice to hear. We're just doing a little bit of reading. I'm pretty good. I actually had 2 days off. Also, sorry, Crespian, you you redeemed the name pronunciation. So maybe this is good for Josh, who's just joining. My name is pronounced Rua Ua Quilta. Rua Ua Quilta. Woof. Oh, you're a friend of Fox. Maybe you watch Wolf. I like Wolf. Wolf is fun. He's a nice guy. He does good ASMR. Fox is one of his mods. Probably his main mod. Excuse me. What? Hang on. There we go. My chair was caught. I couldn't move. I kept trying to move and I was like, why would my chair move in? It was the only mod for so long. That's gotta be tough. That's gotta be tough. Unless you have a very quiet chat and it's like 2 people and one of them lurks for most of the stream and the other one lurks for all of the stream. You were the chat mother. Ah, I see. That's where it was a lot of fun. Rua, wua, wua, ua, kuiwa, kuiwa. Look a little woo woo. That's how woo woo talks. He talks very baby. Woo woo, go go gaga. No, I don't think he talks like that. I think I did a voice for him one time. Or he talked to you guys one time while I was away. He woke up for a little bit. But right now he's cozy by the fire. Rualor. I need to set up that. I need to set that up to. Because you don't know. Well, I actually have a whole video. I have a whole YouTube video that details my my lore. It is in Irish, but don't worry. There's there's subtitles, or rather, there's a. Hang on, no wait. I need not my Live 2D model reveal. An introduction. That's what I need. PowerPoint. Where is it? I can't find it. I'm so mad. Someone find it for me. Maybe if I go over here. 2 seconds. Excuse me, I'm not reading the chat right now. I have it covered. If I switch to this one, it should bring me right to it. You know, I have 2 YouTube videos. I don't use the other one much, but here it is. Normal Irish or farmer Irish? Irish, normal Irish, I suppose. My best attempt at Irish. Not farmer Irish, I don't think. But I can also do it very quickly. I need to set it up so that when people do that, it goes like, check out the lore video or something. Or something more tuney. More tuney. But, well, I am a half-human, half-Tuatha, which is which is of the god peoples of Ireland. The Tuatha were the inhabitants of Ireland before the Gael arrived, of which I am also descended of. My mother, Scatniath, is of the Tuatha and my father, Cuilta, who was second in the Fianna, only to Fionn McCool himself, is my father. So I spent a couple of years in the Sheed Mounds, but then I left to spend time with the Fianna, where I was raised upon stories and lore, quick link. Yeah, that's what I need to do. That's what I need to do. I need to do something like that. I think if I just have it as the redeem, as lore, as like that type of thing, and then also as Ruadh lore, it would be good. I just need to. I will have loads of free time at the end of next week because I will be off. So I'm gonna do a bunch of like housekeeping things that needs to be done. I think definitely needs to be done. It's kind of been sitting in the background, and I've been saying I'm gonna do it for ages. You know, I was gonna add sound effects to certain redeems, so I always know when they're happening. But I think I'm not gonna leave one for Facebook. I'm gonna allow you guys to try and catch me off guard, because I know there's constantly a little goblin running around trying to poke me. Well, we'll give her that. But yeah, that's a very brief thing of my lore. The video is about 3 minutes, I think, and it's a little presentation that I made. I hope anyone who watches it thinks it's cool, because I did try hard on that. It took me so many tries to get that right, to get the Irish down, because some of the words were very tricky. So let me take another quick sip of water before we get back in. Where were we? Oh yes. So the Franciscans also asserted that through God's absolute power, Christ and his disciples were able to return to their pre-lapsarian state, living a pious life without property. Francis, in their view, had opened up this possibility anew, and thus had laid out the grounds for a genuine Christian practice. When John rejected this view on the grounds of the invariance of the ordained order of nature, Occam and the Franciscans were horrified. They were convinced that God could not be bound by the laws of nature that he himself had previously made. Christ's life was a demonstration of this fact. Thus, in their view, the Pope's declaration was a revival of Abelard's heretical position that God is bound to save some from all eternity by his previous will. God, they argued, is not bound by such laws and is subject only to the principle of non-contradiction. They consequently proclaimed the Pope a heretic and fled Avignon, seeking the protection of the Emperor. Occam, in fact, became a member of the imperial court, and along with Marsilius of Padua, 1270 to 1342, was instrumental in formulating the intellectual defence for the Emperor in his dispute with the papacy. There's a lot of little things in there as well that's reminding me, like that whole point about returning to a world without nature, and like that, you know, or without property, and the property didn't exist in the state, in the, you know, pre-fall times of humanity. One could think of it as a state of nature, and that the noble human at the beginning had no property, and then property develops. And society develops, leading to the constant moral degradation, a la this is essentially Rousseau and his conception of the state of nature and the social contract. And of course one can see the development of property and the aim of removing of property in a Marxian perspective as well. So again, we're seeing these discussions, and we're trying to see, can we see links? Can we see links in these discussions and debates of the theoretical nature of God, or the teleological nature of these debates? Can we see in the seeds of the future? Nominalism in this sense was Franciscan theology. It destroyed the order of the world that scholasticism had imagined to mediate between God and man, and replaced it with a chaos of radically individualized beings. However, it united each of these beings directly to God. From the Franciscan point of view, life in a radically individualized world seemed chaotic only to those who did not see the unity of creation in God. For those such as Francis who shared in this mystical unity, all other beings were their brothers and sisters, since all animate and inanimate beings were equally the creatures of creation and creations of God. Is there a long note anywhere? No. There is though in 25. The Church attempted to suppress nominalism, but these efforts had little impact. Occam's thought was censured in 1326 and repeatedly condemned from 1339 to 1347, but his influence continued to grow, and in the 150 years after his death, nominalism became one of the most powerful intellectual movements in Europe. There was a strong Occamist tradition in England that began in the first half of the 14th century under the leadership of Thomas Bardwandine, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Robert Halcott, and Adam Woodham. The Occamists in Paris during the 14th century were also strong and included Nicholas of Autrecourt, John Buridan, John of Mirecourt, and later Peter Dely, John Gerson, and Massilius of Engen, who was also an active in Heidelberg. In Germany, there was a powerful nominalist tradition, especially in the later 14th and 15th centuries, that culminated in Gabriel's Biel. I have no idea who any of these people are, not half. In fact, outside of Spain and Italy, the influence of nominalist thought grew to such an extent that by the time of Luther, there was only one university in Germany that was not dominated by nominalists. While nominalism undermined the view of a harmonious Christian world that scholasticism had developed, often in the face of less than harmonious political and religious realities, and thus worked a revolution in Christianity, it was not merely destructive. Nominalism presented not only a new vision of God, but also a new view of what it meant to be human, that placed much greater emphasis on the importance of human will. So remember, I talked about the seeds of humanism here. As Anthony Levy had pointed out, scholasticism from the 13th century on had never had at its disposal a psychology that could explain action as both rational and willful. For scholasticism, the will both in God and man could therefore either do everything or nothing. Aquinas effectively argued for the latter, Scotus building on Bonaventure's emphasis on God's independence of his contingent creation, and then Occam asserted the radical freedom of divine will. In emphasizing the centrality of divine will, however, they both... Thank you so much, Kiwi Curry. Thank you so much for the follow. Very much appreciated. Hope you're having a lovely week. They both also gave a new prominence to and justification of the human will. Humans were made in the image of God, and like God were principally willful rather than rational beings. Such a capacity for free choice had always been imagined to play a role in mundane matters, but Orthodox Christianity had denied that humans were free to accept or reject justificatory grace. Still, if humans were truly free, and many nominalists believed so, then it was at least conceivable that they could choose to act in ways that would increase their chances of salvation. While this position is reasonable, by the standards of the time it was a view that was highly questionable, since it was perilously close to Pelagianism that had been condemned by Augustine and by almost every Orthodox theologian after him. And there's a note here. Pelagianism was the doctrine named after Pelagius, who in the 4th century to the middle of the 5th century, who argued that original sin did not affect human nature, and that moral will was capable of choosing between good and evil without divine assistance. Human beings in this view are thus responsible for their own salvation, and do not require grace to be saved. Thus, Jesus' sacrifice was not the source of redemption, and his life is merely a moral example. Humans thus can win salvation by a rigorous moral life, whether God wills that they be saved or not. Thank you for the hydrate, Zan. Very much appreciated. Excuse me a moment. I feel like the tiniest speck of water went down the wrong way and tried to murder me. Excuse me for the coughing. Where was I? Despite the repeated claims by Occam and many of his followers that God did not in any way respond to man and thus could not be influenced by any act of human will, however free, nominalists were thus continually attacked as Pelagians. In part, this had to do with their interpretation of man as a willing creature, rather than as a rational being, but it was also certainly due to the fact that a number of nationalists simply found it difficult to countenance a God who was so terrifying and merciless, arguing on the basis not of theology, but simply as a practical matter that God would not deny salvation to anyone who gave his all or did everything that was in him to do. God, there's some Latin. Facentibus cond inse de non denega gratiam. If you do what is in you, God will not deny grace. This was the so-called Facentibus principle. Such a view seemed to imply that there were standards for salvation, but that the standards were completely idiosyncratic to each individual. Hello, Lancelot. Welcome in, welcome in. You're going to make me do push-ups? Okay, fine, I'll do some push-ups. I'll do some push-ups. How many push-ups do we go for? I think we go for like 20. 25, yeah. We'll see. 1. Oh, wait, hang on. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. I gave you 5 extra. Hang on. There we go. Push-ups are out of stock. Not even a timer. Oh no, did I do something to my viewer rewards by accident? I'm gonna have to go in and check the settings. Excuse me. I feel like this is the, like, you guys, like, what you guys hear is just me counting, but it's afterwards when I'm slightly out of breath. I think you guys like. It's when I'm breathing slightly heavier. Hello, D. Hello. You poked me in the face while I was doing push-ups. How dare you? I was in a compromised position, and you unable to defend myself. And you poked me in the face. But you're still my favorite angel. You're still my favorite angel, girl. So it's okay. You've to head to bed just to popped in to say hi. Well, hello, Lancelot. I hope you have a lovely eep. Hang on, I'm going to burp from water. There we go. You did. You took the opportunity. How dare you? She took the opportunity. I better never get, like, stuck in the washing machine. Ignore my dumb jokes. Ignore me. No. Not step demon. I'm gonna faint. That might be one of the best D puns I've heard. Usually it's just a pun on the word D. Putting it in everywhere. Oh no, it took you that long to realize what the joke was. I was joking that you poked. Yeah, I'm not going to explain it. We don't need to explain it. While I was doing the push-ups, compromised position, you get it, you get what can I go back to my book? Can I go? I really need to be able to raise my book and hide myself behind it. Oh. We will not go into detail. That is not something we need on this stream. There's many other people you can find for that sort of stuff. Mr. Say-So streamer. You were the one who poked my face while I was doing push-ups. Rude. You bought this emote for 24 hours. Need to make the most of it. The crying emote. It's good to see people using emotes. I love the sus emote. The heart emote's really good. I love all of my emotes. I love all of my friends. You know, I have a cool badge. Hang on, let me just like go. Hello. I have a cool golden badge for my 15-month subscription. Because we're automatically subscribed to our own channel as a YouTuber. Or not as a YouTuber, as a VTuber. There was more to that than Facebooking. Shh. Fancy, yeah. You want to know who did that? D did those. So there's like 1 month, 2 months. There might be a 2 month. There's 3 months, 6 months. I think it was 1, 3, 6, 9. And then 12 months. So those are for subscription badges. With those of you who don't know how those work. You need to set up a Prime sub. That would be really appreciated. Thank you, Lancelot. Yeah, if you guys have Prime, you can do like a free sub. It literally is free money. Like if you're paying for Prime and you're not using your Twitch sub, you can use it to go support your favorite streamer. If that happens to be me, that would be amazing. Thank you. If not, go use it for like a cool sub for like your favorite emotes or something. You drew circles? D, you drew good job, D. We're gonna put the circles on the fridge. Good job. You're gonna be an artist when you grow up. You are literally my only streamer. I'm pretty good. Hang on, wait, no, I can do a better wink. God, my mama and my rigger. My mama and my rigger, it's so good. I can wink so goddamn good. Wait, no, not on this side. There we go. I have to pull this face to the side. I have to literally go. I have to pull my mouth to the side to wink that eye. Well. Hello, Sugar Fen. You're here to listen. As D-ordained. Yeah. When D-ordains things, it's good to listen. It's good to follow. Well, it's nice to see you, Sugar. Thank you so much for the first time chat. And thank you for the follow, by the way. I noticed that in my notifications. Very sweet. Thank you. Where were we? Ah, yes. So the facibintibus principle. Such a view seemed to imply that there were standards of salvation. Oh, one man's all might be quite different than that of the other. The determination of sanctity and sinfulness was thus taken out of the hands of the Church. No habit of charity was necessary for salvation, for God in his absolute power could recognize any meretricious act as sufficient, and more importantly, could recognize any act as meretricious. The facibuntus principle was thus not only undermined the spiritual and moral authority of the Church, it defended a notion of salvation that was perilously close to Pelagianism. Appearances notwithstanding, this view of nominalism as thoroughly Pelagian is mistaken. While later nominalists such as Gabriel Biel did in fact promote at least a semi-Pelagian idea of salvation, Occam and his 14th and 15th century followers did not. Their emphasis on divine omnipotence simply left little to no room to attribute any efficacy to the human will. It is true that their recognition of the importance of the human will seemed to suggest that human beings could win their own salvation, but this was mitigated by their assertion that all events and choices were absolutely predestined by God. While their doctrine seemed to open up space for human freedom, this was negated by their commitment to a divine power that determined everything absolutely, but did so in an utterly arbitrary and therefore unpredictable way. So we see the seeds of humanism. This is prime content for you. That's great to hear, Sugar. I hope you're interested in history, philosophy, and theology. Sleep time for you. You must join Cozy Ruadh. Yeah, go over there and sleep next to little Ruru. Ihava, sorry. Which is good night. It's the happy marriage of video essay, podcast, and stream. And yesterday it was the marriage of podcast, stream, and lecture. And PowerPoint presentation. PowerPoint, my beloved. With this emphasis on divine determinism, nominalism was able to avoid Pelagianism. But the price was high, for the notion of predestination not only relieved humans of all moral responsibility, it also made God responsible for all evil. John of Meyercourt saw this conclusion as the unavoidable consequence of his own nominalism, admitting that God determined what could count as sin, what would count as sin, and who would act sinfully. Nicholas d'Autecourt went even further, declaring that God himself was the cause of sin. While this conclusion, for a good reason, was not emphasized by most nominalists, it was too important to remain submerged for long, and emerged in all of its distinctive power in the period of the Reformation. Next time Excel? I'm decent enough at Excel. I know how to use pivots. I know how to use sum ifs. I know how to use XLOOKUP, not VLOOKUP. XLOOKUP, the better version of VLOOKUP. I know how to make the pluses. I know how to put the number good, make the number go up by putting other number in number, and it makes a bigger number. And I know how to make number smaller too. Very, very smart Ruru. You know what I mean? He can count. Me no count. Me click 2 sticks. me click two sticks together and then two sticks separate and make number together. It count for me. It do count. Do you guys understand what I just said? I said the plus sign and the equal sign, but sticks. I tried to make a point. There's a note here. As Levi has pointed out, Occam's follower Gregory of Rimini went even further, arguing that God can reject even acts inspired by grace and refuse salvation to the justified. He can recognize numbers. Yeah, that's the extent of my knowledge. Nominalism sought to tear the rationalistic veil from the face of God in order to found a true Christianity, but in doing so would reveal the capricious God, fearsome in his power, unknowable, unpredictable, unconstrained by nature and reason, and indifferent to good and evil. This vision of God turned the order of nature into a chaos of individual beings and the order of logic into a mere concatenation of names. I also know how to concatenate. Do you guys know that formula? Do you guys know what that does? It's a pretty cool formula. I rarely find a use for it, but I know how to do it. Man himself was dethroned from his exalted place in the natural order of things and cast adrift in an infinite universe with no natural law to guide him, and no uncertain path to salvation. It is thus not surprising that for all but the most extreme ascetics and mystics, this dark god of nominalism proved to be a profound source of anxiety and insecurity. While the influence of this new vision of God derived much of its force from the power of the idea itself and from its scriptural foundation, the concrete conditions of life in the second half of the 14th century and early 15th century played an essential role of its success. During the period, three momentous events, the Black Death, the Great Schism, and the 100 Years' War, shook the foundations of medieval civilization that had been weakened by the failure of the Crusades, the invention of gunpowder, and a severe blow that the Little Ice Age dealt to the agrarian economy that was the foundation of feudal life. While such a vision of God might have been regarded as an absurdity in the 12th and 13th century, the catastrophes of the succeeding period helped make God, such a God, believable. Point 28, note 28 here. The Great European Famine of 1315 to 17 was the best known consequence of this climatic shift, but there was also famine in France in a list of various years in the 14th century. In England, the most prosperous medieval realm, there was a famine in 1321, 51, and 69, and the following years. As a result of decreased food production, the average lifespan in England was reduced from 35 to 30 in the period before the Black Death. Immediately after the plague, it fell to 17. Over the 100-year period ending in 1420, the German population declined by 40%, and the populations of Provence and Tuscany by 50%. While the influence of this new... Wait, where are we? Yes, here we are. There. Your friend drove his expensive car into a tree and found out that's how his Mercedes Benz. Hello, Lollock. 1911G. I've heard the Mercedes Benz line before. That was a thing by Dan Bull in his I think it was Drive or the Crew. It was the Crew, the Crew rap. Not the Crew, like the. I said it as like the Crew, the homies. No, but he did the same line, but he did it in such a way where it was like, the rap was the same, the punchline of the, not the punchline, but like the second rhyme of the song was the same lyric as the first. So let me see if I can find it. The Crew lyrics. Excuse me. I like that one. I like that one, I have to say. You wanted to make a joke about time travel, but you didn't like it. Okay, that got me. That made me joke smile. Oh yes, so here's the line that he had. So he has a couple of other lines that are very similar. Like, you tried to build a little scene and got no one to chauffeur it. I jacked a limousine, now there's no one to chauffeur it. I'll tailgate your Mercedes Benz until you hit a tree and see how your Mercedes bends. I'll flip a policeman. I don't just flip a policeman, I flip the policeman. It's an interesting song. But welcome in and thank you so much for the first time chat. We're doing a little bit of reading. How much more of this chapter do we have left, are we? Oh god, we have a lot. We have a lot. I might need to end this chapter halfway. Oh yes, no, definitely I will. Excuse me. While the Middle Ages ended with the triumph of this nominalist vision of God, the scholastic enterprise did not simply vanish. In fact, it was revived a number of times, but never with the same global aspirations. Even Francisco Suarez, Aquinas' greatest defender and the last great scholastic, was ontologically a nominalist. On one level, he supported Thomistic realism, arguing for the extra-mental existence of universals. But at a deeper level, he twisted this argument in a nominalistic fashion, asserting that every individual being was a universal. The world in which modernity came to be was thus not the world of scholasticism, but the world of scholasticism overturned. This collapse of scholasticism did not, of course, occur all at once or in a short space of time, but it was well underway by the end of the 14th century. You wanted to make one about wind, but it blows? These are silly. You're silly. These are cringy jokes, but I love cringy jokes. I like silly jokes like this. Sorry for distracting. No. You're totally fine. You're totally fine, Lolek. I like that name, Lolek. You have a great reading voice. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think I'll keep going for another writing these down to BH. What am I talking about? Yeah, I try and, like, there's a few dad jokes. Dad joke age. We love dad jokes. Dad jokes are just silly. There's maybe someday I'll tell a really long Irish pub joke that's way funnier when you're drunk and when it's told by a really good storyteller. But I'll save that for another stream. Okay, we actually come to the second, I guess, half of this chapter. From Avignon to the modern world. In 1305, the seat of the papacy was relocated to Avignon, in part because the new French pope was beholden to the French king, but also because violence had become so endemic in Rome that the pope was no longer safe there. It remained there until 1378. During this time, Avignon became the focus for European intellectual life. Let me actually take another sip of water. Excuse me. I actually forgot to mute my mic there. Although it was far from centrally located, the city was on a major trade route and had relatively easy communication with France, Spain, Italy, and England. Intellectuals were drawn there for many different reasons. Conservative theologians sought to use the power of the Curia to win intellectual battles they were losing in Paris, Oxford, and other university towns, while their opponents came to defend their radical views. As we have seen, it was for this reason that Occam came to Avignon, but it was the defense of his order that kept him there, and that catapulted him into the struggle with the Pope. However, he was only one of the important thinkers who came to Avignon during this period. In fact, as Occam and the Pope were fighting the final theological battle of the Middle Ages in the convents and courts of Avignon, a few blocks away, the son of a Florentine exile was just beginning a lifelong project that would help to define the modern age. He was Francesco Petrarch. Like Occam, Petrarch rejected scholasticism as overly rationalized, but he also rejected the nominalist, endless arguments about terms and what he saw as vapid speculation about divine power. Like the nominalists, he too was aware of the corruption of the church and hoped for purification and renewal, but he sought in such a renewal not through faith and a new scriptural theology, but through an amalgamation of Christian practice and ancient moral virtue. There's a few notes here. In this light, we should perhaps ask how anyone could continue to believe in a predictably beneficent God. Oh, this is about the historical context, the times of all the disasters. Levi has convincingly argued that the uncertainty around ultimate destination of the Viator helped explain the origin of indulgences and other such things. And then note 30 here. Oh, I'm sorry, I hit you guys with my book. I'm sorry, I kind of dropped it a little bit. Or as one of his successors, Francesco... Oh god, I wish I had Magino here to read this name for me. Guicciardini would put it 200 years later, God's ways are so past finding out that they are rightly called abyssus multa. He, like Petrarch, was convinced that scholasticism was not a body of collected wisdom, but rather thousands of insane ideas. He hits us? No, I don't hit my viewers. It was an accident. Don't call CPS. Are they even a thing in Ireland? You know what? Call them. They can't do anything. In the forest, there is no CPS unless they come here with their guns and arrest warrants. Ugh. Reading surprisingly takes a I can talk for ages on stream, but like consistent reading for like over 2 hours, well, almost 2 hours. Petrarch believed that a Christian life required not merely faith and ceremonies, but moral practice as well, and that such morality could be achieved by a richer understanding of what it meant to be human than draw not merely on scripture, but on the moral models of antiquity. In sharp contrast to the medieval asceticism of the late medieval Christianity, he thus sought to revivify the love of honour and beauty as preeminent human motives. While his thought reimagined generally Christian, he envisioned a new kind of man, with new virtues, not a citizen of the city-state or a republic, but an autarkic individual being who was whole and complete in himself. Petrarch recognized that such individuals might surround themselves with friends or join with others as citizens, but he was convinced they could do so only effectively if they were autonomous individuals first. It was this ideal of human individuality that inspired the humanist movement. Such a focus on the individual was unknown in the ancient world. The ideal for the Greek artist and citizen was not the formation of individual character or personality, but assimilation to an ideal model. Petrarch and his humanist philosophers did not put the human per se at the center of things, but the individual human being, and in this respect they owed a deeper ontological debt to nominalism than to antiquity. For humanism, the individual is not a rational animal standing at the peak of creation. Like Occam, the humanists were convinced that human beings had no natural form or end. They were also thus concluded that humans are characterized by their free will. This will, as the humanism understood it, however, differs in one decisive respect from the will of Occam and nominalism attributed to God, to humans. It is not simply a created will, but also a self-creating will. God grants humanity the capacity to will. Then they make themselves into what they want to be. This notion of self-willing being has clear affinities to the model of the nominalist God. Like the God who creates him, this man is an artisan, but an artisan whose greatest work of art is himself, a poet in the literal sense of the term, able to identify with every being and make himself into any one of them. Such an individual, however, is not God. He is limited by his own mortality and by the chaotic motions of matter, or by what humanists following the Romans dubbed fortuna. Artists can give form to things, paint pictures, shape marble, build palaces, and even create states, but fortune will eventually bring ruin to all. Even the greatest of princes, as Machiavelli, for example, argues, will only be able to succeed half the time. While the individualism for humanism is free and in some sense divine, he is not omnipotent, for he has both a childhood and a dotage in which he is dependent on others, and a death that inevitably brings his mastery to an end. Nope, no important notes there. Might do one more. How long is this next bit? Yeah, I'll do one more page essentially. The humanist idea of fortune reflects an underlying notion of time as degeneration. Form and purpose do not inhere in nature, but are the products of the artistic will that builds dikes against the flood of fortune. Dikes, however, that fortune ultimately overflows. This humanist pessimism about the capacity of art to master nature was reflected in their understanding of their own place in time. They knew that the magnificent world of the ancients that they so admired had perished and been succeeded by a dark Gothic age. They hoped to establish a new golden age, but they never imagined that it would last forever, and never dreamed that it might be successfully improved for all time. Humanism grew alongside and also out of nominalism. It offered a solution to many of the problems posed by divine omnipotence. And there's a note here. It was already apparent to Hymes Hemsowit in 1922 that there was a clear connection to the early Renaissance to Occam. This connection has become increasingly clear, especially in the history of science. This solution was itself constructed on nominalist grounds, that is, on the understanding of man as an individual and willful being, although it is only successful because it vastly narrowed the ontological difference that nominalism saw separating man and God. The consequent vision of the magnificent individual, towering, as Shakespeare's Cassius put it, like a colossus, was thus something distinctly new and a clear step beyond the Middle Ages. Glory, not humility, was this man's goal, and to this end he employed art rather than philosophy, and rhetoric rather than the dialectic. Humanism thus sought to answer the problem posed by divine omnipotence by imagining a new kind of human being who could secure himself by his own powers in the chaotic world nominalism had posited. We today imagine humanism to be antagonistic to religion and even a form of atheism. Renaissance humanism, however, was almost always Christian humanism. In formulating their particular brand of Christianity, however, humanists drew heavily on Cicero and Neoplatonism and laid out a vision of Christianity that placed much greater weight on moral practice than on fate or ceremonies. This transformation, which was evident even among the more moderate northern humanists, pushed Christianity in a Pelagian direction that was deeply offensive to many ardent Christians. In this respect, the humanist impact upon Christian belief and practice was very important in fomenting the second great intellectual movement in answer to the problem posed by the nominalist revolution, the Reformation. And I think that is where I'm going to leave that off. Next stream we'll have a good bit more to do. The pages are quite... That's sweet after finishing. I'm certainly a little bit tired, so a little face hold, a little face rub is sweet. You can't poke. Have I done something to the settings that's like causing things to run out? I must have. I didn't touch anything, so it's very strange. But I will do that right after stream, guys. Therefore I get that. I like that more than being... But no, D, how dare you? I was relishing my face hold, and now you're poking me. You were just testing. I'm sure you were just testing me. I love these eyes. I'm sorry, I got distracted. There was science, yeah. Poke me in the face for science. Thanks for the stream. Thank you guys. Thank all of you so much for coming along. It was very much appreciated. I am going to who to raid into? Who to raid into? Who is live right now? Who is live and who is doing ASMR? I went to clear my throat, but I didn't. But I had my OBS blocked, so I thought I muted my mic, but I wasn't 100% sure. So I went, and then I held it for about 5 seconds while I tried to find my OBS tab again, or window. Would you guys like... Oh wait, Olga's live. What's Olga doing? Okay, Olga Okami is not necessarily a ASMR streamer, but she is incredibly comfy. Oh no, wait a minute. It's gonna raid into her and it's going to do like a big loud thing. Oh no, wait, hang on. Is that... No, it's Cozy BRB right now. And she has the comfy tag and the ESL tag and the hag tag. So like you guys are getting a treat. You guys are getting a big treat. So yeah, we're gonna raid into my friend Olga Okami. I haven't raided Olga for a while, so it'll be nice to do so. I love Olga's stuff. She's very comfy. She has the cutest like ESL Russian accent. Hag tag. We love it. We love our hags, don't we? Don't we, folks? We have the best hags. I go onto Twitch and I say, "Wow, what a good hag." But thank you all so much for accompanying me today. It was very much appreciated. I will see you guys next stream. I'll probably be playing a game of something anyway. Because take a little break from reading. But until then, have a lovely day or night, or if you're sleeping, have a lovely eep. Garev Mila Machagut and Slán Gafol. And I will see you guys later. I really hope Olga's stream isn't super loud when I read it. Dun dun dun. I'm sorry if anyone's sleeping.